Drew Allar as a dark horse Heisman contender. I don't know that I personally see it, but there's actually quietly a case for him to be invited to New York City.
You are Locked On Nittany Lions, your daily podcast on the Penn State Nittany Lions. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are locked on to Penn State football, and as always, thank you so much for making Locked On Nittany Lions your first listen and watch every single day, your daily source for all things Penn State sports. My name is Zach Seyko, and I'm your host of the show, credentialed media member for both Penn State football and Penn State wrestling. He is Kyle Golik, returning to the show, covering college football for 19 years. Newest beat reporter over at Nittany Sports now, and a part of the Maxwell Football Club. So he is just as plugged in as anybody else. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. And right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. Thank you to the everydayers. Remember to let us know your thoughts down in the comments section. Be a part of the discussion as we're going to talk about the secret to Penn State's rushing attack this season and what makes them even better, aside from the fact that they're returning two stars. But the passing attack, why is it improved and how it makes Drew Allar a dark horse Heisman contender? I'll briefly state it, but Kyle, you think that Drew Allar is going to get invited to New York. I don't see it from the sake of volume. I think the efficiency is going to be there. I think that Allar is going to be a phenomenal quarterback when it comes to the analytics, what Pro Football Focus says, QBR, but I don't know that he's going to have the volume to justify an invitation to NYC. You say different, though.
I absolutely do, Zach. And again, thank you for having me on. Here's my foundation of the argument, and then I'm going to extrapolate it a little bit. Last year, the concentration of targets went to tight ends and backs out of necessity. Okay, when you look at what Tyler Warren was doing, it's hard not to ignore him. And we can all sit here and argue that Tyler Warren may have had the most valuable season by an offensive player by any Nittany Lion here in the 21st century. That goes with Larry Johnson and Saquon Barkley in the conversation. Yeah. But we all know how bad the wide receivers were a season ago. Drew, through 16 games last season, had 30 touchdowns responsible for, 24 in the air and 6 on the ground.
Yeah.
So, and look, we sat beside her. We watched a few of those drops from the receivers that should have been touchdowns last season. So what I'm looking at is a couple of things. Number one, I don't think the volume's going to be in the high percentage throws to the tight end this year like it was a season ago. Khalil Dinkins and Luke Reynolds and Andrew Rappleyea will get their looks, but not to the same volume Tyler Warren did. I think, secondly, you got to be able to feed these receivers and distribute it to them. And, quite frankly, I think even beyond the big three that are in there, I think you're going to see some Kobe Howard and Tyseer Denmark in there. I feel where, and keep this in mind, prior to the Big Ten championship game, Drew Allar for the season, so through Penn State's first 12 regular season games, completed 71.6% of his passes. This is despite how poor that wide receiver unit did last season. So, in my estimation, when you're saying, hey, how is he going to New York? If Penn State's undefeated, I'm thinking at worst, Penn State's a 12-1 team after the Big Ten championship game. You start to think he's going to complete a high percentage of his passes. I mean, last season, despite all the issues with the receivers, he still completed nearly 60% to that sort of core. I think he has an opportunity to complete 70% to his core this year. You look at how they're in another year in Kotelnicki scheme. Everyone's, Khalil Dinkins is getting a lot of the same vibe Tyler Warren did as being, hey, he sets the edge real well. You remember what Nick Dawkins said at the Big Ten media days. You think of everything James Franklin's been saying about Khalil, pumping him up, and even Andy has pumped them up a little bit, so I think the tight ends is not going to go away. And in this scheme there's going to be room and opportunities for them. And look, there's going to be so much creative ways for Nick Singleton and Katron Allen to contribute to this offense, whether it's in the ground or even in the passing game. I really see where Drew's going to be at through 12 or 13 games. I think he's going to be greater than 70% passing. I think he's going to have about 3,000 to 3,500 yards passing. And I'm going to see him about 35 touchdowns responsible for.
And that's what I mean. Is that enough to get him an invite when you're going to be going up against players that are just going to have over 4,500 yards? And I do think of a Garrett Nussmeier, where LSU, we'll see. Are they going to be 8-4, 9-3, 10-2? But they're going to sling the football a lot. They're going to be in some close contested games. When I look at what Penn State's doing, they're going to be winning and winning by a lot. Aside from Ohio State and Oregon, they're going to be in positions where they're going to run the football. So if somebody were to say to me, hey, Allar's going to have over 4,000 yards, it's a possibility, but I could see him not playing full games. I could see him handing the football off to not one, but two superstar running backs this season. And Nicholas Singleton and Katron Allen don't have the same case for a Heisman because they're splitting the workload. I mean, between the two of them, they had over 2,000 yards last season on the ground. If that was one stat line, that was one running back, that's an invite to New York City. 2,000 yards and 20 touchdowns on the ground, but it's because it's split between the two of them, and Penn State doesn't care about awards. They care about winning football games. So Drew Allar, I see them throwing the ball a little more efficiently. I don't disagree with you about 70% completion percentage. I absolutely see that. The yardage total, probably more than, I don't know that I can push it to 4,000, I think 3,800. But do those numbers really win you a Heisman in this day and age? For Carson Palmer, you do. Back in the early 2000s, but not in 2025 when, yeah, you could have a quarterback that's going to throw possibly over 5,000 yards this season somewhere.
So here's what I'm going to rattle off to you. Two quarterbacks a season ago got to New York. Cam Ward got there because, Miami just flat out slung the football.
That's what I'm saying.
Okay.
Penn State's not going to do that.
All right. So that's and he finished, I believe, third in Heisman voting. Mm-hmm. But Dylan Gabriel got to New York and got the invite, finished fourth in Heisman voting. And here were his numbers going into New York. He had a 73% completion percentage, threw for 3,500 yards.
Okay.
28 touchdowns in the air and 7 on the ground. I think those numbers Drew can get, because if you have an undefeated or a 12-1 Big Ten champion, and Drew continues doing what Drew does, is he's not making a lot of mistakes, high completion percentage. People are going to recognize, hey, there's that rock got to be distributed to those running backs and everywhere else. It's kind of like last year for Dylan in Oregon. He had to feed guys like Noah Whittington and Jordan James. And then with all the plethora of receivers that he had, it's the same situation. I feel where Drew is, because he's going into this with, hey, he's taken Penn State into a New Year's Six Bowl every single year. Yep. He's taken them to 3 college football playoff games. He has a lot of the award hype. He made that major bounce from his sophomore year to his junior year, and people are going to be like, well, if there should be another bounce, and I feel there will be. It's not going to be as big. If it is as big as this, he's putting up Joe Burrow numbers, and if he does Joe Burrow, then he's the second Heisman Trophy winner in Penn State history. Yeah. But I'm going to take it a conservative route. Maybe it's a 20 or 30% bump. If it's a 20 or 30% bump, there's Zach. That's an invite to New York if Penn State's in that position to get them there as Big Ten champ. Even if they're Big Ten championship game loser and they're 12-1, I still feel those numbers get him to New York.
And with that being said, Drew did have more rushing yards than Dylan Gabriel a season ago. So Penn State if Penn State's going to pull this off and get Drew Allar to New York City, I don't think it's completely far-fetched. I just think it's unlikely. But with what you've laid out here, those numbers are attainable. If Dylan Gabriel can get invited that way, but Penn State would need to go 12-0. The efficiency would need to be off the charts. And that's what it would take for Allar to get that invite. So I am sold on your argument, But I just think with where we are in college football and the unpredictability of it and the stat padding that's going to be there, we'll see if Allar can get one of those top 4 spots at the end of the day. But it is going to be on Penn State to do things that they don't characteristically do, and that's win those big games. And Allar's going to have to be a big part of it. He can't take a back seat against Oregon. He can't take a back seat against Ohio State. He has to be the reason that they win those games if they are tightly contested. If it's a blowout, well, that's a different story. But that's, if you want to talk about unlikely, well, that's pretty much it right there. So you started to dabble on the passing attack. Khalil Dinkins, they brought in Trevor Pena, Devonte Ross, Kyron Hudson. You also talked about their specialty skill sets. We're going to tell you which wide receiver is going to be the most important in this passing game for Drew Allar. And we're also going to still talk about the running game too. That's all coming up next here on Locked On Nittany Lions. And this episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Summer sports are still in full swing, and whether you're about baseball under the lights, golf on the green, or high-stakes soccer action, FanDuel is the best way to make every game even more exciting. And how's this for exciting? Are you new to FanDuel? Well, new customers can bet just $5 and you'll get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. All you got to do is go to the FanDuel app or FanDuel.com. And like I mentioned, Major League Baseball, pro golf, pro soccer, WNBA, Penn State football. That's right. You can make bets on Penn State football through FanDuel. Do you think Penn State's going to go over or under 10.5 wins? You can make bets on game lines that are already available, season props for Penn State. And you can use those bonus bets over at FanDuel if you are a new customer. So if you are new to FanDuel, new customers can bet just $5 and you will get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. Open the FanDuel app today or visit FanDuel.com to get started. Kyle, you started to mention it, passing attack. I mean, that's why Drew Allar can have a Heisman case. Again, I don't disagree with the case, just think it's unlikely, but when you bring in Trevor Pena is that difference maker that Penn State did need in the offseason. And originally I wasn't so sure, but now just understanding what Trevor Pena brings and what he's going to be able to do to elevate, it's now having multiple options as you've laid out, and I've laid out in the past with this too in previous conversations. Pena out of the slot. Now, all these guys have to stay healthy, and that's why I want to have part of this conversation as far as who's the most important one. I think everybody's going to circle Trevor Pena, say that he's going to go over 1,000 yards. I guess if Allar's going to push 4,000, 4,500 yards, somebody has to. But when I look at this passing attack, I would think that for Pena, it's actually more likely that he gets to 500 as opposed to 1,000. And why I say that is because Kyron Hudson is not significantly better or significantly worse than Trevor Pena. Devonte Ross isn't significantly better or significantly worse than Trevor Pena. They're all equal overall in terms of skills, but it's the specialty things that they do. Kyron Hudson in terms of his catch in traffic, spectacular catch ability. Pena's kind of old Mr. Reliable. I think Parker Washington is a very fair player comp if you want somebody to directly compare him to. But Devonte Ross, if I had to say who was the most important pass, and then there's Khalil Dinkins, who we've heard so much praise about recently. He's definitely going to get a piece of the pie in this passing attack. And then Luke Reynolds, and then Andrew Rapplier, Singleton, Allen, whoever that running back 3 is, Allar's going to throw to everybody and their brother. It's not going to be coordinated to one specific player. I'll finish with this. Devonte Ross is the most important target of the group because there's nobody comparable to him. They don't have another speedster in this offense, and he does more than just be a reliable big play threat. It's that big play threat ability that helps open up the ground game. And if they were to lose Devonte Ross for an extended period of time, knock on wood, because I don't want to jinx it, that's harder to overcome than Kyron Hudson or Trevor Pena or Khalil Dinkins because of what they have behind them specifically.
I agree with you. And I was talking to my Syracuse beat friend, Alec Netterville, about this, and I was asking him, talk to me about Trevor. Talk to me, how is he the most effective? And he was telling me, look, Trevor was absolutely on his game and even better when receivers like Jackson Meeks and Darrell Gill, who were completely taking the top off and attracting double coverage, allowing him to operate in the slot. So we're virtually going to say the same things here. It's To me, like, I agree with your assessment to a T. I really think each of these three wide receiver imports that Penn State got via the portal bring a unique skill set. Devonte Ross is a playmaker. We saw what he did against Iowa. We see that he led the Sun Belt in touchdown receptions. Mm-hmm. We see all of those things. I think he needs to be that X factor amongst all the receivers, because if he can be that difference maker to stretch the field, that's going to allow so much underneath, both in the running game and also in the passing game, for Pena to really do stuff. Because if he's able to do that, and Pena is a wizard in the slot, yes, you're going to see much more Kyron Hudson in critical situations. You're going to see Khalil Dinkins maximize his skill, and Luke Reynolds. It's just this downstream effect. It's the one thing Penn State did not have a season ago. Who could just, go deep and make that splash play where it attracted that safety.
It was supposed to be Amari Evans, and correct, he would do. That's the thing with the wide receiver core, is that Keandre Lambert-Smith and Trey Wallace and Amari Evans weren't bad, but they weren't good enough to win one-on-one against the defensive backs of Michigan in 2023, the defensive backs of Ohio State and Notre Dame in 2024. And Penn State was so good, was so elite with just Tyler Warren, that, Boise State could have given, if another team had those similar issues where wide receivers just weren't that, again, because you saw it, Trey Wallace is wide open against West Virginia. Okay, that's great, but that's West Virginia. That's not Notre Dame in a semifinal. That's not Ohio State in an extremely consequential game. Those wide receivers weren't ones and twos. They were twos and threes. And maybe some people are going to consider me to be over generous, but now you've seen Trevor Pena get open in one-on-one situations, granted against ACC competition, but now you bring in Kyron Hudson. If it was just Trevor Pena would probably have a difficult time. Tyler Warren was so much of a superstar that he could do that with double, triple coverage, defensive coordinator scheming for him all week, all day and night leading up to the game. And they still could only limit him to an extent. He was still an X factor in all of those games. But now, when you have the quantity, it's the quantity of the passing attack that gives Penn State a better chance of being a much more efficient offense, and one that's going to be one of the better ones in the Big Ten. Because, like I said, you have Singleton and Allen to start with. That's your foundation. This offensive line, which is going to be top 3 conservatively. But then it's Trevor Pena, Kyron Hudson, Devonte Ross, Khalil Dinkins, the other 2 tight ends, and Reynolds and Rapplier. Again, if you run into an issue with injuries, you might actually go back into what Penn State's been dealing with if you don't have this plethora of targets. I think that's my biggest concern, is if you lose that advantage of the quantity, then you actually might regress to what 24 and 23 looked like, and it doesn't matter who's offensive coordinator.
Oh, agree. And I feel Penn State's most valuable games this season is not going to be Oregon, Indiana, or Ohio State. It's going to be these first 3 games. And you might be saying, Kyle, you're crazy. Here's why I'm not.
Say that.
Because we need to see who's beyond those big 3. We need to see a Kobe Howard and a Tysier Denmark step up. We need to find out who can be there. Can Liam Clifford become a little bit reliable in a lot of what should be mop-up time against those 3 teams?
Yeah.
Penn State needs to get quality game time reps. And I get that, look, Villanova, Nevada, and Florida International isn't Murderer's Row. But if they can get those game time reps and get some key development with those guys, if there is an injury when it matters most, those guys have been there before. They've executed before. That at least gives them a foundation to try to scheme and when they have to face tougher competition.
Now, the ground game is going to help with a lot of this. Play action, what Andy Kotelnicki can do schematically. But now there's going to be a different wrinkle. And it's because Tyler Warren and Bo Pribula are both gone. But it's what Penn State's going to be able to do now because of the players that have returned. We're going to tell you the secret to Penn State's rushing attack that is coming up next here on Locked On Nittany Lions. Penn State's rushing attack is going to be its bread and butter. I mean, how can it not be? if they only had returned one of two players, Nicholas Singleton or Katron Allen, we talk about this in a different regard, but it's actually Penn State has 5 running backs at its disposal when Cam Wallace ultimately gets back to full strength. But I mean, Penn State really does have an embarrassment of riches here with Singleton, Allen, Quentin Martin, and Corey Smith are going to be able to pick up the mantle and literally and figuratively run with it next season. But Cam Wallace isn't out of that equation either.
What about Tyke Hayes? Tyke Hayes,
Jabri Wallace-Coleman. Penn State is loaded at running back, to say the least. But for this season specifically, those first 5 names are, and the three after Singleton and Allen are more than just serviceable players. They are going to play 3 running backs. The secret to Penn State's rushing attack is going to be those 3 running back sets. I don't think they're going to use 4. I don't think they're going to try to sneak Quentin Martin and Corey Smith in addition to Singleton and Allen. But the secret is you're going to see a lot of 21 and 22 personnel. You're going to have Singleton and Allen both on the football field, whether that's to the left and right of Drew Allar out of shotgun, maybe in some I formation, something. Who knows what Andy Kotelnicki is going to come up with. But you could have, I theorize, Allen and Singleton to the left and right of Allar. One of them motions into the slot, probably Singleton, because he's faster. Oh, Singleton on a linebacker as a more of a reliable pass catcher. And then read option. Give it to Allen, quick slant or quick out into the flat. Just give Singleton the space to work with. I don't know. It's so simple, but how do you stop it unless you have an elite defense and you have the playmakers to keep up with it and the discipline? Because that's what Kotelnicki's biggest strength is: the deception, the pre-snap movement that opens up why Penn State's offense was as good as it was, minus some of the receiving assets a season ago, is because of Kotelnicki's creativity. The other secret component of this is, okay, Tyler Warren and Bo Prabula aren't back, but Singleton and Allen are going to take over in that role, and the running backs as well. We already saw it at practice. This was something we saw already up front. Why are Singleton and Allen, Quentin Martin and Corey Smith practicing taking a snap from the center out of shotgun? Drew Allar motions in or motions out, and Singleton takes the snap, or Allen fakes the handoff one way and then goes the other. They are going to be the Wildcat quarterbacks. I don't know how much they're going to throw. We'll see if they try to scheme up a throw. But even still, it's all this misdirection and confusion, and pick your poison. You're either going to get run over by Singleton or you're going to get run over by Allen. So just pick your poison.
You know, I got to talk to Jim Knowles at Penn State Media Day, and I was asking him, like, what makes Andy Kotelnicki so difficult to scheme for? And he goes, from a defensive coordinator's perspective, he forces you to have all your personnel be extremely disciplined, especially in gap assignments.
And Knowles was one of the few to do it well. He has the code to stopping Andy Kotelnicki. Unfortunate in years past, but now that guy's on our side, right? Correct.
And again, the last 2 times a Kotelnicki offense couldn't get a touchdown happened at the hands of a Knowles defense, Ohio State and Kansas at Oklahoma State, when those things happen. So it goes to show how hard it is in the length of time. That's what's going to be tough, because this year, when you have all the plethora of options, especially at the tailback position, you're able to force defenses to have to play mistake-free to the level of gap discipline. And that is so hard to do if your defense isn't dialed in schematically for it. You know, obviously as athletes, you know, they can try to come up with it with great athleticism. That's always there, and that's always going to be there. But more often than not, when your margin of error is so tiny, Zach, that's whenever things can be very, very special with this scheme here Kotelnicki will have this year.
I imagine we're going to see 2 1,000. I mean, because Singleton and Allen did it a season ago, but I see them getting the volume again. Penn State was ahead of everybody else by 700 yards in terms of total rushing. And the names and the faces change, but the objective doesn't. If Penn State's going to be favored in 11 games this season, and we'll see what happens with Ohio State. You think they go undefeated? Penn State obviously has a case. I haven't given my official season predictions, and I will in due time. But again, winning teams run the football. So Singleton and Allen are going to be those closers. They are going to get the volume. They're going to get the opportunities. And when those defenses are just worn down, that's when those explosive plays really start to happen. Again, all things considered, everybody stays healthy. I mean, Quentin Martin's going to be a factor to an extent. Corey Smith will be a factor. I don't think Penn State, and we don't know who that running back 3 will be. It'll be a 3A, 3B, maybe a 3C. As well. I don't know how you keep, if Cam Wallace is 110%, I don't know how you keep him off the football field just by saying, well, Quentin Martin won the competition. Okay, well, Wallace was running back number 3 last season, and they tried to work him in the offense a little bit, and then unfortunately got hurt. So you see the vision of what Kotelnicki is going to do, but when you don't have Prabulin, when you don't have Warren, those opportunities are going to go somewhere else. They're going to go to Singleton. They're going to go to Allen. They're going to go to the rest of the crew. I'm actually everybody has a right to be excited about the passing attack because how much of an atrocity it was in those moments and those consequential moments over the past 2 seasons. But honestly, I'm really eager to see the ground game and how creative it can get and just kind of a little more classic old school football. I think Andy Kotelnicki has so much at his disposal, and we can't even begin to process what he can come up with within the rules of football. I do mean that.
I agree. I mean, we saw it at USC where Warren snaps and Warren somehow gets in the end zone. But one of the unique visions that I have, even though I'm rather the junior on this Penn State beat, and I've been primarily a Big Ten through the SEC and the Pac-12 in my time writing. Yeah. One of the things that I will be able to say from my unique vantage point is I've gotten to see the Alabama teams up close. I've gotten to see the Clemson teams up close, Georgia up close, obviously Michigan and Ohio State. And this Penn State team, Zach, has that same DNA that those teams had. You have an experienced quarterback who can limit mistakes and can make a big play. You're deep at running back. Think of those Nick Saban teams that were winning national titles when they had 4 or 5 running backs in a stable. Elite in the trenches. Yep. I don't think we can, Phil Troutwine, my partner in crime here at Nittany Sports now, Joe Smeltzer, talked with Phil, and he said he wants to have 10 Big Ten caliber offensive lineman starters ready before the season starts. He feels he has 8 or 9 right now. That goes to show amazing depth there. And think about how the offensive lines were for Michigan and Ohio State the last 2 years. They were X factors in that. On the perimeter, you have players that are able to make plays. Penn State has that now. At the defensive line, we'd wish there was a little bit more experience and deeper, but, your top 3 guys, Denai, Zane, and Alonzo Ford are about as good as anybody in the country.
I'd include Zariah Fisher in there too. I would.
And you look at linebacker, Knowles has been very impressed with what DeLuca and Rojas has done since they've come back from their injuries, and very pleasantly surprised with Amari Campbell. And there's a lot of great youth underneath there. And then when you think in the secondary, great secondary across the board, plus a Darius Dixon that Knowles told me, he told you that he was one of the more dynamic young guys. And then when I followed up with him about who does he compare to, who he coached in your career, he said Ross Cockrell. And Ross Cockrell was in the NFL for almost a decade, won a Super Bowl with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Yeah. That's pretty much high praise. And he was, a 3rd or 4th round pick out of Duke. So if you can imagine if he was at a Ohio State or Penn State, maybe he's a higher pick because of the brand. This team, Zach, across the board, my friend, is as good as I've seen going into a season. Now they just have to deliver.
And that is where we will finish things on this edition of Locked On Nittany Lions. Kyle Golik, go check out his work. Newly cemented in at Nittany Sports now. Links to his work will be down in the description. Thank you to each and every one of you for checking out this episode. Please let us know your thoughts down in the comments section about the ground game, passing attack. Drew Allar is a Heisman contender. That's the debate. So let us know which side of the debate you are on. My name is Zach Seyko, and I'm your host as always. If you're not an everydayer, become one, subscribe to the YouTube channel and wherever you get your podcast to keep up to date with all these conversations around Penn State. Daily. We do this daily. Kyle, thank you so much for the time. Really appreciate a great conversation and can't wait to have you back on the show.